Leola Brooks, and I'm almost 90. In 2 months, I will be 90 years old.
Just as a side note, when I ask you a question, if, for instance, if I say, where were you born? If you could say, I was born so-so.
Oh, okay.
So,
We want to start over?
No, we're
okay.
fine. We can edit this.
Okay.
But I just needed to mention that to you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about where you were born and what it was like living in the early years in Deerfield.
I was born in Deerfield Beach, Florida, June the 15th, 1926. I was born to a family of 13. 8 girls and 5 boys. We had a wooden house on 3rd Court. I sold the house maybe about 20 years ago after my parents passed. It was a 3-bedroom house. And I guess you would say, well, how did all of you stay in a 3-bedroom house? And there were 13 children. 1 room was for my parents. The other bedroom was for the girls. And the other bedroom was for the boys. And it worked out well because when some of them became grown, quite natural, they moved out while others was being born. So there wasn't a problem. And I had a very happy time growing up in Deerfield. The only time I got very angry is when my mom wouldn't let me go to pick the beans as I wanted to. I went to pick beans maybe 2 or 3 times, and it was because I was an asthmatic from birth. But I wanted to really go to be with the other kids who were out there picking the beans. But because of that, I didn't want to keep my little sisters and brothers. They are still alive, and they tell me about it right now. So they almost hated me for a while because I had to help raise my little sisters and brothers. And most of us are still alive. Not most of us, but 6 have passed. And there are now, how many living in Deerfield? I think 2 in Deerfield, and my brother and I live in Boca. So you see, I didn't even go very far from Deerfield after I got married. But I had a happy life, very happy life.
When you were you born in a hospital or was it a midwife?
Midwife.
Tell me, do you know about that experience? Does your mom ever talk about it?
Very little. And I didn't know that particular midwife. I knew the one that was for all of my other sisters and brothers came after me. By the way, I was the 3rd child. And I met the other midwife for my sisters and brothers. She died some years ago. In fact, there is a picture at the Butler House, if it hasn't gotten misplaced, of this midwife.
Most of the families at that time were born with midwives?
Yes, yes.
Tell me about your early childhood, and other than the picking of the beans. What did you do as a child? Where did you go to school, to church?
Okay, be glad to. I went to school at Braithwaite Elementary in Deerfield. In fact, they still have something there to prove that we did have a school. I worked hard with the Historical Society, and we have Braithwaite, so you would know that we went to Braithwaite. Going to Braithwaite was very good. We had to walk, by the way. I don't know, I think it was about a mile, maybe a mile and a half. I never measured to school. And I loved the things that we did that they don't do anymore. I loved saying the Pledge of Allegiance when we got to school. We had the flag outside, and we had to say the Pledge of Allegiance before going into the classroom. Then after going into the classroom, we had to sing, "My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty." We had to sing that. And I don't know whether I should say this, but then we prayed. I know they don't want us to say that now, but we did pray. And because of the praying, I think things were better. As you know, we did not have a lot of things to do, but I enjoyed the recess. We call it recess. Now they call it physical education. But you should have seen me. I love merry-go-round, the mulberry bush, we did all those different things, and little Sally Walker sitting in the saucer. Now the kids don't even know what you call it, those different rhymes, and Jack and Jill went up the hill. So I enjoyed playing all of those games.
What about the educational side of it?
Well, I love that. And you had to get your lesson because back then, I don't know why, the teachers, we used to call them pimps because they would tell your parents. And parents said, "What? If you didn't have your homework," we had homework every day. And now the children don't even want to learn the multiplication table. I have a nephew that just finished high school. And as a baby, in fact, yes, he's 17. As a baby, he was angry with me. He said, "Auntie, why? Why do I have to learn my multiplication table? That's silly. I got him right here." And then he wanted to get on the computer. I said, "Suppose the computer go down. Then what you gonna do?" So I made him memorize the multiplication table from 1 through 12. I said, if I wake you up at night and said 9 times 8, you better be able to tell me. So I like that. We had to memorize things. We had to memorize different poems. And so I enjoyed doing that. And as I said, if you didn't know it, a letter went home. Also, they used to spank you back there, and I was petrified, so I would do right because I didn't want to be. After being spanked, they would send a note that you had to be spanked because of talking or acting up in school. And I remember one time, if you'd like for me to tell you, one time that I did something that I shouldn't have done. We were having spelling on the chalkboard, and the girl that was next to me, I don't remember who she was, one of my classmates, looked over at my word and copied it. And when she did that, I took the eraser and erased her word because I said, "You copy the word." But you know what happened after that? The teacher wrote a note to send home to my mother. And I said, "Please don't. Please don't. Would you spank me? Would you spank me?" Don't say. Well, she didn't spank me, and she didn't send the note home after I pleaded. But as I said, I love learning the poems. I even remember some of them now, not all the way through, but you can ask me to say some poems, and I can say quite a bit of them. And I also like going to church. Sometimes I think Mom made us go too much, but I love that because we had church on Monday nights. That was the prayer meeting. Then we had the youth, something on a Friday, I believe it was. And then quite natural Sunday, we had church twice. In fact, it was 3 times Sunday because it was Sunday school, then morning service, and then night service. So I really, really enjoyed my church.
What was the name of your church?
It was Church of God. Now it's Cathedral Church of God.
Tell me what you did after school for entertainment.
Well, we couldn't leave the yard. That was it. So we played ball, and my brothers shot the marbles. And if someone came over, we played the ring plays. And we loved jumping rope. We had a little song, I can't remember what it was, but you had to turn around and touch the ground while you were jumping the rope. We did that. So that was our fun things, meeting like that.
when you became a little bit older, did you go to Carver High School too?
Yes, I went to Braithwaite through the 9th grade. Then I went 1 year to Stewart with an art, but I finished at Carver High School in 1946. And from there, I went off to college.
Where did you go to college?
Well, for my bachelor, I went to Florida Memorial, that is now the school in Miami. It is a university now. And for my master's, I went to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana.
Tell me about your teenage years. What was the most important thing to you as a teenager in Deerfield?
Really and truthfully, it was very quiet. My mom would not allow me to go places. I can go to a movie with other girls, and we had a club in Deerfield named the Diamond Club. But the first time I went inside of that, I had been to college and back, and was still afraid to tell Mom I had went in there, because she was one of those parents that did not believe, in clubs and different things like that. But I enjoyed it. And a lot of times the church gave us, what was nice, they would have activities to the church that we can go out and play games, and they'll serve us meals like that. So I was glad one time to go to college so I can get away.
Tell me about your parents and your grandparents and when they came to Deerfield and what their occupations were.
Okay. My mom came to Deerfield, she said, when she was rather young. I think she said 12 or 13, I'm not sure. And my father came when he was a young boy, too, something like that. But all that I know of my dad, he worked on the railroad for not very long. I think he told me like 2 years. But he became a farmer. First, they call him sharecropper. Perhaps I've heard of that. And then he owned his own farm, not far from where the Bank of America, be in that area. I got very angry with him because I was in college when he sold it, and I used to tell people it was stolen. And truthfully, I still feel that way. He should have gotten help from me or someone else. He really gave it away because he didn't understand money as it should be. I forgot what he got an acre. It was 10 acres, and I can't remember what it was then. Maybe like $1,000, whatever. To me, it was stolen from him, but that's what he was, a farmer. My mother usually was a housewife. She went out occasionally, and they call it grading the beans, putting them in the hamper. But mostly she was a housewife. Well, I guess she had to be that. She had 13 kids.
So did you go out into the fields too?
Very seldom, very seldom. I took care of the younger kids.
What did your father raise?
Beans, peppers. I don't think tomatoes, but I do remember the beans and the peppers.
And what did he do with them? Did he send them on the railroad?
No, they took them down to a place in Pompano. I can't remember what it was called, and that's where they sold them.
To the farmer's market?
It might be something like that, but it was in Pompano, and they would have to take them down in the trucks, and sell them there.
When did you learn to drive?
I was about, I guess, 14 or 15 when I really learned to drive.
Did you drive any of the equipment on the farm?
No, definitely not.
Okay. Tell me about some of the worst experience that you had in Deerfield and the best experience you had in Deerfield.
Well, I won't say it's the worst, but it is something that I didn't like at all, and I talk about it sometime even now. Some years ago, I was grown at the time. There was a knock at my mother's door, and I went to answer the door, and there were two policemen there. They spoke, and I spoke back. And they said to me, "We want to come into this house." And I stared. I said, "Come into this house? Why?" They said, "We got a call that your father is selling, I think it's called it moonshine." So I said, "What?" They said, "Yes." So I said, "Not in this house if he's selling it. I don't know anything about it." I said, "No." And they said, "Yes, we are coming into this house." So I said, "Who said so?" They said, "We said so." By that time, my mother heard me, and she came, and she said, "Don't be like that. Let them in." And I got angry with my mother for saying, "Let them in," not showing us anything, who sent them. You know. And they came in our little 6-room house, and looked in every bedroom, went in every bedroom. And when they went in my mom's and dad's bedroom, they said, "Oh, we found it." Because I was walking right behind them every room. And guess what they found? My father had been to see his brother, and he had, they call them croaker bags or some kind of bags at the time. They were oranges and grapefruits. So that they begged me pardon then. They said someone had called, and so they saw this truck stop at my parents' house with these bags, and that's what they thought they were. But that made me very angry. So that's one of the worst experiences that I had. But I had so many good experiences. I don't know the best one that I really don't know. They have given me beautiful parties and everything, so most of my experiences were very, very good.
Did your parents talk anything about the Prohibition era and the rum runners that came in on the beach and brought the booze from the Bahamas?
No, no.
And of course, the moonshine at that time when the police came to your parents' home, there was a lot of shining out in the West.
Oh, I guess that's why.
Yeah. So, so you went to school here and you went to college. What happened after your college?
When I got in from college, I began to work as a teacher in the Belgrade area. And I stayed there, I believe 11 years or 12. And then I was transferred to Boca, and that's where I stayed at Boca until my mother got ill and did not want to be put in a home, even though I told her I would take care of her. So I gave up my job then, and I stayed with my mother to and from my house and hers. And when she passed, that's when I went and worked as a principal at a church school in Delray.
What do you feel is the biggest difference between growing up back then and growing up today?
I feel like growing back then, there were more love between people. I think that we had more respect for each other. I feel that way now. Anything goes. Kids talking back at their parents. Kids even fighting their parents. I'd like to tell you a story about something that happened to me with my parents, and I shall never forget this either. I came home from college one year. So truthfully, I thought I was grown. And I thought then that I could sort of talk to my mom, kind of, like I wanted to. And this night, I was getting dressed to go out. Never shall forget it. And she looked at me and she said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Oh, Mom, I'm going out with the girls." And she said, "Oh, you are?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh." So I kept getting dressed. And finally she said, "You really going out?" So I said, "Yes, Mom. Why? What's up? You don't feel well? You need me?" She said, "No, you're not going out." And how many young people would listen to their parents? I was in this time, very few. And I said to her, "Mom, not nasty, I'm going out." She said, "Oh, baby, you really going out?" I said, "Yes, I am." And she looked just as calm as I'm looking at you. And she said these words, "Okay, darling, go get your clothes, and I hope that you have a nice time where you will be living. I hope you will come to see me sometime." And I said, "Mom, are you serious?" She said, "Yes." So I called one of my brothers, and it was a lady in Deerfield that was one of my friends. And I said, "Tell her, don't come by." My mom said, "I cannot go." But I have been standing, listening at kids saying to their mom, "Oh, yes, I am. I'm grown." So it was more respect. I wish we would come even a little better about that. I told a lady not long ago, and someone said I'm going to get knocked in the mouth one of these times because her young girl was looking at this computer. And I told her I said, "Look at that and see what she's looking at." And she asked me why, and I told her why. I told her what I had seen on those things. Naked people, people doing all kind of things. And she thanked me for that. She said, "I never thought of that." I said, "You don't know what being sent." So that is something that I wish we could come back some kind of how and have more respect for each other.
Indeed. During the 60s, when there was so much happening in the United States, Kennedy is assassinated, the Cultural Revolution, the hippies, and all of that. What kind of impact did it have on you in Deerfield Beach?
Well, I thought about it, and I was concerned, and I said, "Well, the only thing I can do is pray." It's the only thing I can do is pray. There are some things that happened to me I think it was during the 60s, that had me frightened, and I think you would have been too. I was driving one weekend from Belgrade, because although I was teaching in Belgrade, I would come home on a Friday, most Fridays, to my mom. And coming home one day, a car passed me. There were 3 of us in the car, 2 other teachers. Opened his window and threw a bottle at my car. And I panicked. And then he blocked the road. And back then, going to Belgrade, it was just a what would you call it? Two-way,
2-lane.
And he blocked the road. And the young lady that was sitting in the car with me opened the windows, put up her fingers, and said some words that I wouldn't dare repeat. And he got out the car. It was, I think, 3 men and 2 ladies during that time you're talking about. And he said, what blank blank you said? And she became speechless because we didn't know what was going to happen. There was a canal on the right side of us, if you remember, and a canal on the left side of us. And he asked her, what did you say? And all she could come out with was, oh. So here I'm petrified, didn't know what to say. But I said a word to the man up above in my heart. And I said to him, I didn't say anything. He said, I know you didn't, but she did, and I want to know what she said. I said, well, she did say something nasty because you hit my car. I had, at that time, it wasn't no fancy car, but it was new. And he said, I meant to hit the so-and-so car. So I said, but I didn't say anything. So let me go. He said, no. I said, but this is my car. I have proof. Let me go. And he said to me, no. He said, where are you from? I told him. He said, you ever been to Alabama? I said, no. He said, you ever been to Mississippi? I said, no. He said, you haven't heard what we do to people like you? I heard because I've read and I studied, but guess what I said? I said, no, of course not. And he said, well, we hang you. He said, and I got a mind to push this car in the canal. So I said, please don't do that. So I know about things like that. I begged him not to. And that wasn't the worst part. I looked, and here come a policeman. So I felt good in my heart. But as the policemen were pulling over, the guy got in his car and pulled off. And that's when I learned some things. Please, policemen, if you're listening, I don't mean all of you, but I learned some things because when he came, I said, stop him. Stop him. He bothered me. He said, oh, I'll see about that. I said, but he's not speeding. I said, catch him right now and bring him back. He said, oh, I'll see about that. He said, did you get the license? I said, no, I was petrified. I couldn't look for a license. He said, well, I said, but get him. You can still see him because the road wasn't curved. But he wouldn't get him. So he said, give me your name. I did. He said, Leola Brooks. Give me your address. I did. He said he was writing it down. I doubted very seriously. And give me your phone number. I did that. He said, well, you'll be hearing from me. Now, how could I hear from him? He had no number for the car. He saw the car. He didn't try to get it. So how in the world would he get in touch with me? So that's one of the worst. I had a few others, but that's one of the worst experiences that I've ever had.
Let's take a break because the bell's going to ring in a couple minutes. But for the rest of you who are in the room, just to let you know that during the time that she's talking and before that, the Ku Klux Klan was very prominent in Florida.
Yes.
And in fact, there were more lynchings in Florida than there were in Mississippi
Yes,
during this time.
that's true.
And I did history on the Belglade, Clewiston, LaBelle area, and there was Klan activity in there.
Yes.
So what she's saying is quite accurate.
Sure enough.
Did you want to take a drink of water?
I didn't touch anything wrong, did I?
You're good.
okay, when I finished Carver, I said to my mom that, Mom, I've sent in all my papers and everything to college, and I'm accepted, I think. And she started crying. My mother started crying. And I said, Mom, why are you crying? She said, baby, the little money that I had, that you were saving, because I would work like a restaurant, at a hospital. She said, I have to tell you the truth. I used some of that money to buy the land. So I said, you don't have any? She said, no, not enough to talk about, sweetheart. She said, but I'm struggling, and you can go maybe the second semester or next year. And I said, no, Mom, I'm going this year. She said, but how? And you don't have any money. How are you going to college? I said, Mom, I'm going to college. Don't worry about me. She started crying again because she felt responsible. So I said, Mom, didn't you tell me to have faith? I said, so I have faith that I'm going to college. So she calmed down, and she gave me the little money that she did have, just enough money to ride the train, because I went up on the train to St. Augustine to college. And a few dollars, maybe extra if I needed to eat. That was it. So when I got to the college, I met some of the friends from Miami and they said, when are you going to register? Because we want to take some of the same courses you take. Because you kind of smart, and we copying off you, and we laughed and had fun. And I said, I don't want to I'll register when I get good and ready. Couldn't register, because what am I going to say about the money, Well, they said, I said, go ahead and register. Don't bother about me. Don't worry about me registering. But I had gone to the president's office. He looked. He got quiet for a while. I guess he said, what a silly girl. However, he said, well, tell me, what kind of grades you have? So I said, sir, they're fair. I said, I did fairly well. So then he called his secretary and had her to bring in, the papers that we had to send in with the grades. And he looked. He said, why did you lie? I said, why did I lie? He said, you said pretty good or so. He said, this is excellent. So you're a good student. I knew that all the time, but I didn't want to sound like I was bragging. He said, okay. He put it down, wrote a note, and said, let this young lady, Leola Brooks, register and talk with me later. I went, registered, didn't have one penny. And the first year, they put me in the dining room, but they said, you see, I'm large now, but then I was weighing only 100 pounds. And they just let me work with the silverware. I would take the silverware off the table. And then he said, no, that's too heavy, taking those silverware. So he put me in his home. His mother was living with he and his wife and the kid. And I went there, and his mother was an angel from heaven. She would say, don't you ever come here without your books. Because she said, when you're on a scholarship, you got to keep up your grades. And I don't want it to be said that I worked you so hard that you didn't pass. So I went to work at her house and truthfully did very, very little. I would go there, and she kept my hours on her refrigerator. Maybe I would go there, let's say, 8 o'clock that morning and stay till 9 or 10. But when I went back the next day, she had 4 hours. So that's how I accumulated the hours. And the last year in college, I didn't have to pay a penny. I had that many hours to calculate. I stayed with her for, I think, 2 years. That made 3. And the last year, I was okay. So I tell folks, when I talk to young kids in the Historical Society, I said, don't tell me that you can't go. Don't use the word can't. I said, don't even use that word in your vocabulary. I said, here you can get scholarships and all that now, and you saying you can't go, you don't want to go. I have nieces that went, and they got the Butler Scholarship. You know, it was nothing such as a Butler Scholarship during my time. But I like to tell people that to let you know that if you want to do something and your mind is made up, you can do it. I won't say go the same way that I went, but I give that story to let folks know that it can be done. Because after I finished, Florida Memorial, I taught school a while before going back for my master's. And I didn't have to do that working on a master's. I had the money. And that is how I went to school. I went in the summer because, I was teaching in the winter and got my master's. And I had so many hours with my BS that it took me only, I think it was 2 years to get my master's in the summer, or 3. But that's how I got my master's.
Is there any other story about your time in Deerfield Beach that you want to tell us about?
Let me see, can I think of another one? In Deerfield.
How about the ice cream?
Oh, yes. It was in, I believe, the late 60s or the early 70s when it was passed, integration, that I went to Deerfield at this place in Deerfield. And my sister was with me, and we said, let's get some ice cream. And we went running over to get the ice cream. But the signs were still up. One window said colored, and the other window said white. So I went to the one that said white. My sister, thinking that I didn't see it, was trying to make signs to me, and she was pointing a finger, And I just stayed there. She kept on. So I said, oh, you point? I said, oh, yes, I know. I see it, honey. I said, I'm buying the white ice cream. So she said she called on then what I was doing. So I said, I don't want strawberries and chocolate today and all that. I said, I'm having the white ice cream. So the lady, I guess it was husband and wife, they didn't come to my window right then. They went and they said something to each other that I could not hear. So they came and they gave me the ice cream that I called. And then I said, that's what that means, doesn't it? I said, my sister was trying to say something. I said, but am I right? It said white and color. Isn't that right? She didn't say a word. The man didn't say a word. But I stood there. I said, tell me, isn't that right? I want to do what's right. She still didn't say anything. I said, well, I hope that's right, because I'm going shopping right now. And when I come back, if that's not right, we're going to march. That's all I said. I said, when I come back. We went shopping. Thank the Bird Hines State. And when we came back, the signs were down.